welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Freed, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. And we have a special guest this week. I'm joined as well by my other good friend, Mike Giarraputo, who is a contributor for the Jet Press. Mike, how you guys doing today? What's going on?
Doing well, man. Looking forward to getting into this.
I'm doing well, too. Finally nice to talk about a Jets win because we just been crushed with negativity for the last 2 months. So at least there's some positivity to lead into the Wednesday show, which is not normal for us. So I don't even know how to react half the time because normally it's all doom and gloom. Now we got new people on and the Jets won. It's a new day for the Jet Press.
Sure. Yeah, and we got a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about some GM candidates that the Jets are looking at, ranking the three known candidates at this point. We do have some potentially bad stuff to talk about, which is some trade rumors regarding guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and maybe even Sauce Gardner. We'll get into all that. We'll talk about Mike Vrabel as well and maybe even talking about the Rams game. I don't know how much we even want to talk about that. But before we do that, Mike.
Before that, we're gonna get to our member AJ who says Mike and Mike return, sort of. We'll try and
we had one back in the day.
Show.
Yeah, Brian is right. I only know people named Mike. It's a weird curse that it's been inflicted upon me.
Mike, I was listening back to the one we did. I think it was May 15th or 14th. We ran through the whole schedule, did our schedule prediction. We were a little bit off. I think we had the Jets at 10 or 11 wins.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit, but it's
Justin
okay. We'll move on from that.
Justin was off God knows where. He wasn't able to rein us in. That was the problem.
See, if I was there, I would have said 4 wins. I would have said 4 and 10 after 15 weeks. You guys just didn't have me there. That's what.
Before we get into the show, though, you could follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. Just make sure you hit that little purple icon. That's Apple Podcasts. You can get right there. Good reviews will help pump us up those charts. So leave a 5-star review. Not for our ego, just for business end of things. And on YouTube, there's 2 ways you can support the show. You can subscribe. It's free. Doesn't cost you a dime. Just subscribe and hit that thumbs up button for a like. And if you want to pay 99 cents, you will get priority comment reply because you'll join our membership program. As Brian Sternbeck says to lead us into our first topic, can you be friends with Mike Vrabel and Mike Borgonzi, the GM, assistant GM of the Kansas City Chiefs?
Brian, the issue I was also friends with Mike Williams, and that really didn't work out too much. Hit or miss, depending on the mic.
AJ says Justin is my high priest of Jets realism. I thought I was. Oh no, I'm the president. You're the high priest.
This is new. I've never been called a high priest before. That's crazy.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like Jim Jonesy. I want to kind of stay away from anything a high priest of whatever.
I'll take high priest. Feels like it's above president. I'll take high priest.
All right, your first act as high priest will be discussing Jets GM candidates because there are 3 actual names that we have down right now. We have Thomas Dimitroff, who was probably the more high-profile of the 3 names. He was the GM of the Atlanta Falcons for 12 years, 2008 to 2020. Obviously got to a Super Bowl in that time, had 8 winning seasons in those 12 years. Pretty much ran the NFC South for most of his tenure with the Falcons. Then you get John Robinson, who's the GM of the Tennessee Titans when they had Mike Vrabel. This does not increase the odds of Vrabel coming to the Jets because I believe there was a lot of headbutting between those two. So I don't know if they're getting along very well. But Robinson was the GM of the Titans, got into an AFC championship game, kind of helped retool them on the fly because they were just a crater of nothing for a while, helped get into the playoffs a little bit with Marcus Mariota and Ryan Tannehill. And then Louis Riddick, who has some experience in a front office, years of actual experience, not just like getting a coffee. Like he was director of player personnel, like legitimate experience. But for most of the last decade, he has been on TV. He's been on Get Up and all these other shows. So it's hiring a guy off TV. Of these 3 candidates, looking at him in terms of just if I had to rank them in terms of preference, I think it's firmly ironclad. I want to get your guys' opinion. Firmly ironclad for me. Dimitroff 1, Robinson 2, Riddick 3. And I think Riddick's a smart guy who knows a lot of football, but with how monumental of an undertaking this is to fix this Jets team of all Jets teams, you can't hire a guy off TV who hasn't done it in a decade. There's just too much of a risk. Same with Rex Ryan. I know some of you fans want Rex Ryan. Same thing. Can't hire a guy who's doing A-block shows about how good is Patrick Mahomes right now. You can't hire that guy to fix the Jets right now. 2 is Robinson, mostly because I liked a lot of Robinson's moves on the pro personnel side of things. I thought when he did spend money in free agency, I thought he mostly was pretty good. I think players developed well under him. The problem I have with Robinson is I don't think he was a very good drafter. If you look at 3 drafts in a row, first-round picks, he had Remember Isaiah Wilson, who just like quit football midway through his year? Isaiah Wilson, and then Caleb Farley the next year after that. I'm blanking on the third guy, honestly. But years and years of high draft picks. Like, they always hit on later round picks, but the premium picks, he would just light on fire. And then obviously the A.J. Brown trade with Treylon Burks to replace him. That's not a good way to end what I thought was a pretty successful start to a career. Dimitroff, who's mostly just been hanging around with other rich dudes in private equity and other companies in the last couple of years, he at least has he could say, look, I would have won a Super Bowl if not for insane God-level bad luck that has never happened ever since then, blowing a lead like that. I would have won a Super Bowl. My teams were consistent winners. I picked a quarterback. I picked Matt Ryan, who's probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. My team, I don't think anybody ever said the Falcons had bad rosters in those years. They were always putting up points. They were always competitive. He is clearly running away the top guy for me of these three.
100%. I'm with you. Dimitroff checks off every box for me, outside of the fact that he hasn't been in the league in 4 years. But I can excuse that. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, as what we know about what he's been doing the last few years is he went off and started his own analytics company, which, hey, man, that checks boxes for me. Because one thing, if you want to talk about John Robinson during his time in Tennessee, they were notoriously not a very analytical organization. I'm pretty sure they did not have many or a very big analytics department, which is a red flag for me in today's.
And Robinson did come from New England, which is a very much a gut check kind of
they
organization.
Both, weirdly, Dimitroff and Robinson crossed over in New England at the same time in the scouting department. So they were both there at the same time. But yeah, I mean, anytime regarding Dimitroff, anytime you're with an organization for 13 years as a general manager, you're probably doing something right. Something went well. His first draft, he drafted Matt Ryan. He drafted one of the greatest wide receivers of all time in Julio Jones. Even to the very end, he was still making some good picks. I mean, Chris Lindstrom in 2019 was a good pick. He checks all the boxes. And on top of that, I think he's another person who has hired really good coaches, or at least has formed coaching trees underneath him, whether it's Mike Smith, whether it's Dan Quinn, so many future NFL coaches from
probably the two best coaches in Falcons history back to back.
Exactly. And then all the assistants under him from Kyle Shanahan to I believe Matt LaFleur was there, to Mike McDaniel, to Raheem Morris, bunch of different coaches underneath Dimitroff, which, underneath Mike Smith and underneath Dan Quinn. So that's another thing that checks the boxes for me. And he has a scouting background, which I really like. So Dimitroff is my top choice as well. I think I would give the nod to Robinson over Riddick. Robinson was with the Titans for 7 years. So, generally, unless you're a Joe Douglas, if you're with an organization for that long, things are probably going right. He made the playoffs, I think, 4 times during that stint, including a couple of division wins. He led his team to the AFC Championship. And I know the later drafts are bad. Those early drafts are actually pretty good. I mean, Jack Conklin, Derrick Henry, Kevin Byard in his first draft is really, really good. It got bad later. Towards the end of his tenure there, it was not good, from the Isaiah Wilsons, the Caleb Farleys, Treylon Burks, whoever. But I don't mind John Robinson. Wouldn't be my top choice by any means. And I also agree with you, Mike, that I don't think that would mean necessarily that Mike Vrabel is coming to the Jets. I haven't seen anything verifiable to say that they 100% definitive hate each other, but there was a power struggle in Tennessee.
Right.
You didn't want to trade A.J. Brown. You could tell that easily.
Right. And in the end, Vrabel won that power structure. So I don't know if that would lead to that. And then Riddick, he's a dart throw. I don't want to say he's the Mike Mayock, right? Similar situation where it's like you're hiring a guy from TV, but he has not worked in the NFL in a decade. He does have a scouting background, which is nice to see, but he's been on TV for a while. I know he's got connections around the league. Would not be my top choice by any means. Josh Kerr asked, who's this guy? This is Mike Giarraputo. If you are a long listener of the show, he has been here before. You've seen him, not with me, not with the three of us, but with Mike and Mike. This is Mike. And Mike, I'll ask you now, Mike.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the GM search? What is your ranking of these three?
Guys, I think we're all in the same boat here. 2 and 3 for me are a little more interchangeable in terms of John Robinson versus Louis Riddick. I wouldn't really want either of them. I think Dimitroff is a legit candidate, and out of the 3 so far, and I think he'll remain in that boat for me at least. I think he's a top name for the Jets in this candidacy. I was rewatching Jake Asman was at Radio Row. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jake Asman a few times. Was at Radio Row 2024, talking to Dimitroff really about the Jets, about his time with Atlanta, and something that Dimitroff mentioned was he felt like even with 13 years with Atlanta, every year he was on the hot seat. And we kind of know what we're dealing with here in terms of, Yeah, like the one thing we're hearing about these Jets openings, whether it's GM, whether it's head coach, is, well, who's even going to want to take it? Because they're going to have to deal with Woody Johnson. They're going to have to deal with this dysfunction. He's dealt with, not that the Falcons are a dysfunctional organization, but he's dealt with at least pressure from an owner that's going to at least meddle a little bit in terms of what they're doing. So I think Dimitroff, for me, would be the top name. Robinson, we mentioned the bad picks towards the end of his tenure. He did trade A.J. Brown. It was basically A.J. Brown for Treylon Burks. Something, I mean, we're wrong about receivers. Receivers are very hard to evaluate out of college. The NFL draft is something that's incredibly difficult. He nailed some picks. I loved Treylon Burks out of college. I was very wrong about that. So were the Titans. Trading A.J. Brown and not paying him, you look back on it, it obviously wasn't the right move. But he built a roster that I think that they go 9-7, I think 3 years straight. And then they ended up, going to the AFC Championship game. They had a lead against Kansas City, as so many other teams did. But Robinson would be sort of interchangeable with Riddick. Riddick is such a different idea in terms of what we would be wanting. I don't know. I mean, he is a very, very smart guy. You could just tell. It's nice to, at least with Riddick, if we were to hire him, which I don't see happening, we kind of know who he is and what his philosophies are because we see it on TV every single week. I mean, he's doing color commentary for games. He's on NFL Live. He's on Get Up. He's on all these shows. He's offering his football opinion. And I've never once thought, well, this guy's an idiot. So at least with Riddick, he's a smart football guy. As you guys mentioned, he's been a director of pro personnel in some places. But for me, I think we're all in agreement here. Dimitroff would be my number one candidate out of the 3 guys we've had so far.
Looking back at Robinson, though, this is if you're in the pro Robinson camp, 4 straight 9-7 years. And then he goes 11-5, 12-5. And then he gets fired in the middle of 2022. That year they finished 7-10. Todd Downing is the OC, by the way. But when Ryan Tannehill started, they were 6-6. So there was a lot of Malik Willis and Josh Dobbs and a lot of stuff that kind of was beyond his control. So really the one time he had an okay year, they ended up getting rid of him. Other than that, winner, consistently for Tennessee, which is a hard place to win. Dimitroff, his overall record, 113-95. He made the playoffs 6 times, and of course the Super Bowl run. The one thing about Dimitroff that I think could scare him off this job is you did mention that he's always on the hot seat. I felt like he was always on the hot seat in Atlanta.
Right.
If you look at a lot of owners, Arthur Blank, generally, unless it was like Bobby Petrino, where it's like something beyond the pale, generally has been pretty in terms of this is my coach and my GM. I'll let them coach and GM. More than most owners, I would say. Like he's a visible owner, Arthur Blank, but he's not controlling in a Woody kind of way. So if he felt that he was constantly on the hot seat in 12 years under Arthur Blank, going from that to Woody Johnson.
Right.
That's just a huge shift because Woody's not going to change. He's a 77-year-old man. He is who he is. He's not going to change his management style. That could be a big culture shift for a guy like Dimitroff. And he might be one of those guys, almost like Saleh, when you get on and you think of the car's going 50 miles an hour, and then you get on, it's going 200 miles an hour, and oh my God, how do I stop? That's what I'm afraid is going to happen with him.
Ryan in chat said, great take by Mike. Great to see him back on here. Hey, we only have great takes on the Jet Press.
Thank you, Ryan.
Every take, we've never once had a bad take. Point them out.
I don't think so.
Give me the clips. We don't have them. They're fake.
I mean, there was me talking about Dalvin Cook and you talking about Carl Lawson.
No, fake.
Other than that,
that was AI. That was fake, Mike. That was fake.
Fake, of course.
It was a deep fake. But I think it's interesting also because as we're going to talk about in a moment with someone like Mike Vrabel, who is apparently maybe the Jets' top target. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment. I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to get a guy if the Jets were to hire someone like Mike Vrabel, right? Which we all agree would probably be his plan to hire. If they were able to do that, Vrabel has a lot of influence likely in the GM hire at that point. I don't know if Dimitroff and Vrabel make a ton of sense as a duo together. I think if you bring in someone like Dimitroff, who is a very experienced GM, who's been out of the league now for 4 years or so, I think that, oh my God, I just saw that. What is going on here? What is this? Hold on. Who is this? Who did this to me?
I think that's Brian Sternbeck.
Brian, if this is you realize you can't change your name back for 3 weeks. We have a comment from Optimum Customer Support in chat. It said culture shifts can be good. They even have the Optimum logo. You went through so much effort to do this. And
that's what we want is a culture shift. I guess what I'm just fearing with Dimitroff is like with Woody, you can only change so much of the culture.
I have a visceral reaction to seeing that logo. I just want you to know, like that actually annoyed me. No, that was funny bit. I appreciate it. But yeah, I don't know if the Jets were to get someone like Vrabel or like Dimitrov or even a John Dorsey, right? An experienced GM who's been out of the league. I mean, Dorsey's in the league right now, but he's not a GM. I don't know if they'd want to come back unless they have a good amount of control. And I think Vrabel would be in a similar situation where if he's a head coach, he's going to want a lot of control. So I think if you were to bring in Vrabel, you probably get a rookie GM. And then if you bring in someone like Dimitrov, you probably get a first-time head coach, whether that's an Aaron Glenn or a Liam Cohen or whoever. I think that's something to consider as well.
Do we trust a Mike Vrabel with a decent level of control? How would we define that with Vrabel? Because I mean, he's the head coach of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know he's according to Connor, he was one of our top candidates. But what is that? What would that mean? A good level of control for Mike Vrabel?
And that's the thing that also worries me about Vrabel. Like, look, Vrabel, I think would be an A hire, especially considering how this job looks right now and who they're attracting. If they get Vrabel, I'd be very pleased with that. My concern is for everything good Mike Vrabel has done in his coaching career, I don't know why he's got this billing as like, A, this culture changer, and B, this wizard that's going to come in, sweep everything out, and get everything running professionally and go win championships. Like, he's certainly a good coach, but I don't know if there's just not a ton of great candidates this cycle. I feel like he's being just a tad overvalued. Like, because he had some problems in Tennessee. Like, nobody's acting like he got – like, I think he got fired, I would say unjustly, but I could see why some people were a little upset with him. I mean, he was there 6 years, I think, and only one of those years did he win a playoff game. So I could see why – in a weak division. So I could see why there's some trepidation there. Like, Vrabel would be a great coach. I think he would be – if Mike Vrabel was the Jets coach this year, I think they're a 6-win team or a 7-win team right now, just from having him. But is he really going to be this giant cataclysmic thing that just blows up the old Jets culture and fixes everything from the ashes? Like, I don't think he's going to do that. And I feel like a lot of Jets fans and some people in the front office will expect him to do that.
I think he has really good PR. I think Mike Vrabel, he's got the football guy background, so people look at him and they're like, oh, this dude's a culture changer.
That's Zach Wilson's PR staff. I've seen Caleb Williams is having a pretty good 17 touchdowns, 5 picks his rookie year. I've seen more positive tweets about Zach Wilson and Bryce Young lately than I have about him. Somebody get those guys' PR staffs. I guess Vrabel found him.
If you are a young quarterback and you get drafted to the Jets, there is nothing you could do that will make it seem like it's your fault to the national media, to the national consensus. Fans looking in will be like, "Oh, the Jets ruined another quarterback."
But the Bears are doing it. Caleb's actually doing good, and then they don't get it. But the Jets,
the Bears don't have the same narrative that the Jets do. But
I would argue they've had worse quarterback history.
Probably, but the Jets have had worse just general history, and I think that plays into it. But on that narrative front, I think that's with Mike Vrabel, where he got to Tennessee, and Tennessee was not a terrible organization, but a bad organization, not a good one, not one that had a long history of success recently. He gets there, almost immediately wins. He makes the playoffs, I believe, his first year. I believe he made the playoffs his first 4 years there, or did he miss the playoffs first year?
He missed the year,
and then he got
before he got there. They had made the playoffs and won a playoff game, and then they fired Mike Mularkey, and then he missed the first year. He misses the playoffs, and then it's the championship.
Right. I think that early success of getting to the AFC championship game and then winning back-to-back division titles, even though it was in a bad division, I think that success carried him a long way and gained him a lot of positive aura points in for lack of a better term, in the minds of fans. And then, like you said as well, Mike, I think when he was fired, a lot of people were not happy that he was fired and they believed it was an unjust firing. So that is another part that plays into it, where it's like, oh, he's a good coach. He already has that reputation as a good coach. And then he's fired before fans think he's ready to be fired. I think all of that is why he's held in such high regard around the league, on top of the fact that his personality, even just his image as this football guy, this tone setter, this culture figure, I think that carries a lot of weight.
He's really not like, I feel like it's like a solid thing too, where honestly, this is going to hear me out on this. Where like they have this physically imposing and like angry, like look about him, but they're just kind of like normal guys. And like Saleh got this reputation as like this big, angry meathead guy who would scream. And then you just come up to the podium. I love what these young men do on this team. And I love what this young man is doing. Nothing like you never got that same bombast. I feel like that's kind of it with Vrabel, where he's got this image of this old school coach when he's just kind of like a regular guy.
Well, Saleh originally was the guy in San Francisco. It's something that at least I forgot about as a Jet fan, that he was, there was a guy designated to hold him back on the sidelines when he was going too crazy as a defensive coordinator. And with Vrabel, I think what's helping his image a lot, yes, you guys mentioned it right there, the football guy, the imposing physical nature just of him on a television screen. And also the fact that the Titans are 3-11 this year, and they look like a mess without him. Yeah. I know Levis, Will Levis is Will Levis, and that's they're dealing with that. But the defense is taking steps back. There doesn't really seem to be. I mean, what do we say all the time about these good teams? With good teams, we know what they're trying to do, and we know what they're trying to be. We know what Kansas City is. We know what Buffalo is. What is Tennessee? What are the Jets, for example? We haven't had a culture in a very long time. But I think at least
Jets are bad is what they are.
What we need here, pretty much nailed it there. But what we need here, and I think the argument among Jets fans is not really against a Ben Johnson, but almost comparatively to the Bears, right? Like you kind of need somebody that's going to not only be this, offensive genius and he's going to scheme this guy open, this guy's going to get better because of this coach, but I mean, you need a culture. I mean, you look at the Jets this year. When Saleh was fired, Sauce Gardner said, "We're playing the rest of the season for Robert Saleh." That is something that you never, ever hear out of any player on a team whose coach was just fired. That's something that you shouldn't hear. But I think the argument for Vrabel there is he'll come in, he'll set a culture, and the identity he has now, and it might be just, he's got a great PR team. People love him on social media. He's a football guy. He's kind of just like a barstool kind of vibe. He's sort of that kind of coach. But I think that's helping him. And I don't think, look, it almost sounds like a stupid question when we're talking about the Jets, but if they were to hire Vrabel, can you guys picture it being a disaster? Because I really can't.
I could picture it being a disaster only because we still don't know how things are going to work out with Rodgers.
Sure.
And I think if Vrabel had a shortcoming as a coach, it was he nailed one good offensive coordinator hire in Arthur Smith, and then Arthur Smith left, and he replaced him with Todd Downing.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern is, number one, is that he's never going to get the offense right, which was literally what brought down Saleh, because Saleh's defense was amazing, right? And he never got the offense right. So I think that's why I have some trepidation, is because everything that we're talking about with Vrabel that we like, and Vrabel has more behind him than Saleh did when he got hired, but like a lot of the things that would appeal about Vrabel are also what people liked about Saleh when they hired him, and Saleh didn't work out.
Yeah.
I think having the at least track record that Vrabel has makes him more, I don't want to say appealing, but I think it makes him a better hire than obviously someone like Robert Saleh, who we all loved at the time, and or at least I know Mike and I, you and I did. We were very high on that hire, and
I'm still defending him.
I agree. I much like Todd Bowles, I think he's someone who could definitely find success in a different environment. By the way, Brian did comment. He said Robinson got fired midseason at 7-4. So this means, by the way, that is Optimum Customer Support, who commented again, is not Ryan. Optimum Customer Support says it's not hard to picture disaster in these parts. That is absolutely
very true. Yeah.
You're absolutely correct.
We're seeing it now. Forget picturing it.
I'm going to try and figure out who this is. It could be AJ, could be Josh, or maybe this is actually Optimum Customer Support. Maybe this is Lindsay with this morning, and this is her way of helping me finally. And maybe that's
maybe they're seeing this, saying, this looks fine. We're
going
to delay this another few weeks.
The order.
Lindsay, if that's you, please look at my video camera. It's not fine, right? I know because my upload speeds are terrible. I know it's not good. But yeah, I mean, we're doing this analysis of Vrabel. All three of us will be, I think, ecstatic if the Jets hire Mike Vrabel. We'll all be extremely excited if they were to do that. I don't think right now he'd be at the top of my expected candidate list. I do believe the Jets will pursue him. I do think they'll actually get him in the building, and I think they'll be able to interview him. It sounds like they're already putting out feelers to see if it is not AJ. AJ clears the air. It is not him. Maybe it actually is Lindsay from Optimum Customer Support. If that is the case, that's crazy. But I do believe the Jets will get Vrabel in the building. I don't think he's who they'll end up hiring. I think he'll have interest from other teams as well, and possibly go to another team. But it's cool that the Jets are at least making a strong push for a candidate that we all agree is a top candidate.
Looking at the Jets, too, I think part of the reason there's a lot of Vrabel smoke is there's pretty much like one of two archetypal hires right now in the NFL. Because really the idea of like hiring the coach from 5 years ago who hasn't really done anything then, that hasn't really happened a lot, like a Rex Ryan or a Gruden or a Dick Vermeil coming back. Like that doesn't really exist anymore.
Right.
Dick Vermeil was out of the game 16 years they hired him back.
Yeah.
But well, there's two kinds. There's either the culture changer or the young wunderkind kind of guy where, Ben Johnson or a guy like a Clint Kubiak or even like a Josh McCown in Minnesota,
Liam
Cohen, like a guy who is probably going to run a Mick Shanahan offense. He's like 37 years old. He has one hair on his nuts. He's a young guy that's really like built a culture, but you're just banking on his schematic excellence being enough to elevate the quarterback. And there's teams where I think as much as the Bears need a culture change, I think the Bears should get a guy like that for Caleb Williams. Maybe the Patriots should look at a guy like that for Drake May. Like, I get pairing a guy like that with a young quarterback. That's not where the Jets are right now. They're in the culture setter kind of area. And right now, the only guy who looking right now, we'd probably say, I believe that he has a shot at coming in and just ripping everything down to the studs and changing things is Vrabel. And I feel like there's some anxiety because if they don't get him, which is entirely possible because he's going to have a ton of options. He's going to be very picky. He's probably not going to be like, why do I want to deal with Lee Johnson? Why do I want to deal with this whole Aaron Rodgers thing? I got disgruntled players. One player said we have a loser gene. He's one of our, cornerstone pieces. Like that's a tough job.
Your QB said
is a little bit easier.
Is Vrabel going to have a bunch of options? Who aside from the Jets and, I mentioned Chicago, but they might go after – if I were Chicago, I'd go after the offensive guy. I'd go after a Ben Johnson, a Bobby Slowick, whoever it may be. But if not the Jets for Vrabel, what other teams are we looking at? The Patriots, if they move on from Gerard Mayo? I don't know if he's going to have all of these options.
The Jaguars could be fun for him.
The Giants. If
they lose him to the Giants, that would be.
I think that's very possible. I don't think Mayo goes anywhere. The Saints, possibly. It's not a great job to take, but the Saints are probably going to be looking for a new head coach. Keep Rizzi.
He goes back to Tennessee.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, what if they fire Callahan and he goes back to Tennessee?
That's the other thing. Like, I've said his name a lot in discussing all these coaches, but like he's just become the example for me. Brian Callahan, because nobody knew who Brian Callahan was before he took that. That kind of came out of nowhere when the Titans hired him because he was not getting a ton of interest. He's my new archetype for a guy has one good year as a coordinator. And by the way, they look a lot better without Brian Callahan now. The Bengals do offensively. Yeah, that was supposed to be his whole shtick. Like that, my fear is like for every Sean McVay, every Kyle Shanahan out there, there's a Brian Callahan.
Sure.
My fear is the Jets are going to get stuck with a Brian Callahan trying to finally hire the young offensive guy.
This is a good question from Marcelo Cabrera and Chad. I want to get your opinion on this, both of you guys. Marcelo asked Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. Now, I'm not saying – I don't know if the Jets are actually going to be able to hire either of these guys. In fact, I would not bet money on either of these guys ended up coming to Florham Park. But if you, in a perfect world, could pick between the two, and you could just pick the next Jets head coach, would you want Vrabel or Ben Johnson? Mike Giarraputo, you go first.
I'll say Ben Johnson. I said this in November of 2023 that I wanted Ben Johnson to be the coach of this team, so I'm going to stick with that. I do think there's a chance that we can get either one of these guys. I mean, maybe it's not a great chance, but not to derail us. But really quick, I mean, where would you guys rank? There's a lot of things that go into this, but where would you guys rank the Jets in terms of available jobs? Because there's only 32 of these out there.
I think the Saints are worse because of the cap situation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's another job that is like objectively
Giants?
Definitely worse. The Giants have a worse roster and a worse situation to work with.
Jaguars is probably a better job because you got Trevor Lawrence. The roster's not as bad as the record suggests.
Jets and Giants are in a very similar tier. I think they both have owners who can be a little overbearing at times. You have the pressure of the New York market. The Jets do have a better roster, but I think the Giants have more flexibility with what they can do. So they're in a kind of similar spot. The Raiders – that's a
tough ass division, though.
It's not a great roster.
Probably a worse spot, but remember, you're going to get a top 2 pick. So that's another thing. Like you can pick quarterback, and you'll be in a position to pick that quarterback. So I don't know. I would say that the Jets are in the bottom tier of the available job, but I don't think they're the worst job. And like you said as well, There's only 32 of these. So I don't
He's
think
with the Browns right now, too. Maybe they dump Stefanski, put
if
him
the
in.
Browns
That could
dump
be
Stefanski is immediately my top choice.
I'll take Stefanski. I was just gonna say,
I would
he
take
would be my
Stefanski.
number one.
I would take Stefanski over Vrabel and Ben Johnson. That'd be my top choice.
Can I qualify this by saying it depends? It depends on if the Jets bring Rodgers back, I would rather have Vrabel because that means we're going for another postseason berth. I don't know, probably not a Super Bowl, but we're going to try to break the curse. And I trust Vrabel more with a team that's built to get to the playoffs now because he's done it before with a worse quarterback than Aaron Rodgers.
I trust Vrabel.
If they rebuild totally, like if Rodgers is gone and Devontae's gone and whoever else, and it's just clean slate,
right?
You head coach, you get to pick your guy. Then I'd want Ben Johnson because you can grow with that young quarterback.
Yeah, guys, I've gone back and forth on this in terms of bringing Rodgers back or not bringing him back because going into the season, it was, well, the roster is ready to compete right now. And then we talk about there were a lot of positives in terms of getting rid of Rodgers. First of all, the headache of just all of it, and we could just put it behind us. It was 2 years. It didn't work out. It was a circus. It was right now, it seems like the most embarrassing time to say, yeah, I'm a Jets fan than it has been in my life. But if you bring him back, I mean, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but you still have guys like Sauce, like Garrett, like Breece Hall that are not being paid yet. Jermaine Johnson's not being paid yet. Fashanu, right now, he looks like he's going to be one of those left tackles that makes a bunch of money. Like, we have a bunch of guys that aren't being paid yet. We have a relatively young roster. We have a lot of young talent on the roster. Bringing Rodgers back, do you take advantage of that window? I feel like the positives might outweigh the negatives in terms of I might want Rodgers back with this team next year.
Well, and you got to go pair all these young guys who've done nothing but lose their whole career through another rebuild.
Exactly.
Like we're going to talk about this with the whole let's get into the trade thing because Garrett Wilson apparently is spooking all of us because Rich Cimini on his now again, this is Rich Cimini on a podcast talking about a thing he heard from a guy who knows Garrett Wilson. So talk about the 6 degrees of separation here,
right?
To get this rumor cooked up and out. But he says he expects Garrett Wilson to request a trade at some point in the offseason. And it remains to be seen if that is contract posturing, because people do that all the time, or if he's genuinely frustrated. Because I also I'll believe this, more so than a lot of these other, I don't want to use the word diva wide receivers because that gets overused a lot and it's kind of like a hack football term. But I do think that Garrett Wilson does have more of like an I want to win right now kind of thing, as opposed to because he's going to get paid no matter what.
Right.
And he knows that. So I think, and he knows some contender would pay for it. Buffalo would pay a ton for him. Kansas City would pay a ton for him. Baltimore would pay a ton for him if he was available. And he knows that. So I'm looking at Garrett Wilson. And my thought is if you don't bring back Rodgers, which means you're probably not bringing back Devontae, which means the starting quarterback's probably going to be like Tyrod Taylor or maybe Justin Fields because they're not going to be in the Darnold hunt. And he's like the only guy who could be a no-doubt starter in free agency right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Justin Fields or Jameis Winston or somebody like that.
Kirk Cousins.
Or probably Jalen Milroe.
Kirk Cousins, Mike? Kirk Cousins?
Oh God, yeah.
Interest you in another aging quarterback?
You place the old Achilles-ridden quarterback with another old Achilles injury.
They're cornering the market on 36 or older post-Achilles injury quarterbacks.
And the funny part, though, too, is like Aaron Rodgers, too, is debate. Also, a quote from Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic says, Aaron Rodgers said he'll take some time after the season to decide what he wants to do with his future-wise. Quote, unless I get released right away.
Yeah,
that should be fun. It's going to be a fun month.
That's
January
a big one.
and February for the Jets.
It's very
just talking about what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to take his time with this one.
Yeah, it'll be a mutual decision. Really quick, we have been confirmed. This is Lindsay from Optimum in chat. She's trying to help, so I appreciate the help, Lindsay. But yeah, as far as the Garrett Wilson stuff's concerned, it was Rich Cimini on his podcast basically said that he had heard from people in Garrett Wilson's camp that they are expecting him to request a trade this offseason. Now that doesn't mean he did clarify. He's like, this is just speculation. This is not Garrett Wilson saying this. This is people in Garrett Wilson's inner circle are believing that he will request a trade. Which to me, that implies a few things. It implies that Garrett Wilson is incredibly frustrated. And it's also, by the way, not the first time we've heard these rumors, because Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic reported it earlier this month, literally like 10 days ago, that Garrett Wilson last year had basically expressed not only privately to people in his own camp, but to the Jets, that if things did not improve, that he would not want to stick around with the organization long term. Well, things didn't improve. They got worse, in fact. And the Jets got Aaron Rodgers
Good
back.
for him, but worse overall.
Yeah, no, we're good for him. And that's the thing, Mike. You
Right.
hit the nail on the head when you said that Garrett Wilson isn't really, I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't care about his numbers and he doesn't care about his production, because obviously he does. Any athlete, any competitor would. But he cares about winning football games. That's what he wants to do. Unfortunately, the Jets have lost 10 or more games in every year he's been with the team, and they're in the midst of their worst seasons somehow since Garrett Wilson was drafted. He wants to win. The guy wants to win. It's not about the production. Right now, he's 8th in catches. I believe he's like 10th or 11th in yards, and he's top 4 in targets. The only guys with more targets are CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, and I think
Jamar Chase, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
Jamar Chase.
And that's with Devontae taking
And that's
targets away.
with Devontae Adams, who just had 200 yards last game. Like, Garrett Wilson is getting his production. The issue is not that he's not getting his numbers. The issue is he wants to win, and the losing takes its toll. And Mike, when we talked about last week, because I'm still in the like, hey, I'd rather them lose games for a draft position. I'm still in that camp, and I still am. But when like the reason I'm not pissed when they lose or when they win, like when they beat the Jaguars, I wasn't pissed, is because there are positive side effects of that. I don't think necessarily winning late in the season carries over momentum into the next year. But for guys like Garrett Wilson, who are trying their damnedest to win and are so sick of losing, those wins help. They help the psyche. They help your mentality. And with Garrett Wilson going into the offseason, he just wants assurances that this organization can possibly turn things around within the next couple of years. And I think it's really taken its toll, seeing the last 2 years where you go in with Super Bowl expectations. And unfortunately, last year it gets derailed by an injury. And then this year it gets derailed by the team just being incompetent and a mess. It's really taken its toll on him. So I don't blame him for thinking this way. Now, that being said, even if he does request a trade, which I do believe is a genuine possibility, I don't think this is just speculation.
Sure.
I believe there's a genuine possibility that he does request a trade. Even if he does, I don't think the Jets trade him. I would be very, very surprised if the Jets traded Garrett Wilson this offseason. They have a lot of control. They have him under contract already next year. Then they have the option. Then they could franchise tag him. Then they could tag him again. And theoretically, they could tag him again after that. So they have plenty of team control. And we've seen numerous examples of players, wide receivers specifically in recent years, requesting trades and then not ultimately getting traded, whether it's Deebo Samuel, Ayuk. As far as non-wide receivers, it literally just happened with Budda Baker, who requested a trade and got extended yesterday. So I don't think it's a death sentence by any means that Garrett Wilson requests a trade, but it would be a bummer. It would suck. It would suck that a guy who is everything you want to build an organization around, both on the field and off the field, as a person, his character, this is everything you want in a winning organization. And to see him pissed and to see him upset and requesting out, that sucks. I don't think the Jets would actually trade him, but it would really be unfortunate.
But
Yeah,
before I get to a question I want to ask you guys, Optim's back. We want volunteers, not hostages. I want good players. I don't care how they're here. And Garrett Wilson's a good player.
Yeah.
The question I have for you guys is, do you think Rodgers being back or not? Like, let's say hypothetically Rodgers is back next year. Does that make it more or less likely Garrett Wilson does not request a trade? Would he be happier with Aaron Rodgers or less happy?
I think he'd be happier.
You would think happier. It depends on the alternative.
I would hope.
But
every time I hear, like, the whole get rid of Rodgers and then by proxy Devontae, who's still really good. Like, I mean, he's averaging 80 yards a game with the Jets, and that's with all that other stuff.
I don't think it, honestly, I don't.
I look at this, though, and I'm like, looking at next year, do people want a football season in New York? Because the Giants are going to be bad again. The Jets are going to be bad. It's like, how many – I know normally you might not operate like this, and it might be the best to execute a plan, like a 2 or 3 year plan. But at a certain point, like, you got a fan base with so many battle scars on them that they're not going to buy anything that you're selling in this rebuild, because they bought everything that they were selling in this, go for a championship. Didn't work out. They bought everything with Zach Wilson. And it didn't work out. So I would much rather them try to at least salvage something and go, look, Garrett, we're going to try for your sake, for Sauce's sake, for Breece Hall's sake, to make something in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And at least say even if we don't win a Super Bowl, just to say we're the guys that broke the streak, like, that's something. That's something they can hold on to, as opposed to just detonating everything. And then you have another new coach, and it's Jalen Milroe, and it's 4-13, and it's more of the same. Like that could mentally break him. And then he would. And then I think if they have another bad year, I think he could be totally. Even if they pay him, he could just keep requesting trades.
Right. I think the right thing to do, no matter what we end up doing at the quarterback position, and if it's a rebuild, if it's a retool with Aaron Rodgers, the right thing to do is keep Garrett. Because if you rebuild, let's say it's Tyrod starting next year, let's say maybe Jordan Travis gets in a few games, you want a guy like Garrett to not develop Tyrod Taylor, but to develop a guy like Jordan Travis, or I pray to God we don't get Jalen Miller. I don't even think he should enter the NFL draft, if I'm being totally honest about it. But
I mean, he's the only, outside of the first two, he's the only one who's really even got a shot at the first round now.
Yeah, because Alex went back to school,
and he's like he's the trait guy this year. And sometimes it's Josh Allen, and sometimes it's Anthony Richardson. And knowing the Jets will probably end up with more Anthony Richardson than Josh Allen. But if you want to draft a guy, that's pretty much it. So otherwise it's Tyrod, which
I think we don't. If we can't get, even if we can get, I can't envision a scenario where we're going to get Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I don't think we should be taking a quarterback this year. I really don't think we should.
Probably not in the first round at this stage.
No.
Milroe would be the only possible option, I think, right now. I mean, obviously, again, I say this every time. It's December. A lot can change from now until April. But as of right now, looking at the draft order and looking at the quarterbacks expected to be available and where they're supposed to go, Milroe seems like the only realistic option for the Jets. Let me ask you guys this, because Mike, Luch, you do raise a good point, talking about, look, as much as it might be in the best interest of the organization from a logistical standpoint to just tear it down, suck next year, start Tyrod Taylor, maybe develop a mid-round guy or Jordan Travis, or even if you do draft the Jalen Miller or whatever, even if that might be in the best interest, is it worth the toll it takes on a guy like Garrett Wilson? Will Garrett Wilson want out? Or also, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner, those guys aren't getting any younger. Do you want to field a competitive team next year? So I think it's a fair question. And I want to add,
if you want to sell them on the future to alleviate those concerns, don't worry, Garrett. We got a perfect plan. You have to. I know you're going to suck for another year, so this is 4 years in a row out of 4.
Yeah,
you're going to lose double-digit games and suck and complain that you're not maximizing your potential, because that's going to happen again. Because the quarterback was probably going to be inferior to Rodgers, but I swear to you, this time it'll work. That's a tough sell.
Let me ask you the question then, though. If that's the plan, if the plan is, okay, let's be the Chicago Bulls, let's be a mid-team next year, because we don't want to tear it down to piss off our players, but we can't be good enough to be a genuine contender because we're just not there. What is the best option at quarterback? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Do you see this team as a genuine playoff team next year? Do you see a scenario if the Jets run it back with Rodgers and Adams? Do you see a scenario where they're a playoff team next year where they win 10 games?
I mean, we are talking about a year where everything. I mean, horrible coaching, kicking cost them 2 games. Kicking, cost them 2 games.
But they're still not a good football team. Even outside of those, the advanced numbers don't show this is a good football team.
But how much of that is
coaching matters?
Saleh we liked him as a defensive coach. He had the offensive shortcomings, and then when you throw in Olbrich, who's just a zero in everything, and ruin the defense. Like if you get a Vrabel or if you get an A and a Vrabel, Ben Johnson, I think Cliff Kingsbury deserves a second chance. I think he could be pretty good for a team that needs some offense. Like if you get one of them, then why can't you?
Guys, usually these things get turned around. I mean, if you were to get a new coach and the defense were to improve, we also have free agency and the draft still to go to improve this roster. I don't think the defense, at least personnel-wise, is really that far away. I mean, you look at it, and we still have the names that are there. I think Sauce Gardner is still, despite what many Jets fans who maybe don't pay attention closely to the games think, I think Sauce Gardner is still one of the best cover corners in all of football. Yes, he's had some struggles tackling this year. But
I think he's the best at covering people. He struggles with tackling.
But I think the Jets are 2-6 in one-score games this year. Usually a good coach is something that turns that around, maybe turns that into a 5-3 in those games, or even a 6-2 in those games. And Rodgers, I don't know how we feel about Rodgers, where he's at. I think right now he's a borderline top 12-ish quarterback. I know some stretches of the season, the middle of the season, he was not even close to that. I was fully out. I was fully out watching that Patriots game, watching some other games that he, Arizona for sure. Yeah. But I think we saw, he was dealing with a bunch of injuries. I don't know if you guys watched the I put my not. It was actually pretty entertaining. I watched the first episode right before we hopped on this. I watched the first episode of the Enigma documentary, the Aaron Rodgers thing on Netflix, and his rehab, his attitude towards injury and knowing his own body and taking advice from other people. It is unlike. I mean, it's probably like a lot of other great athletes, but it is. We remember last year. I mean, he was 9 weeks off an Achilles injury, and he was talking about wanting to return to practice. He's telling, Dr. Neil Elitrach, we all know that name at this point. He's telling all these Jets, people on the Jets staff, like, that is what's going to be happening. I will be returning to practice. Like, you can tell me this, you can tell me that. I am going to be doing this. And Rodgers we saw the injury he sustained against Minnesota. That looked, how bad did that look? I thought he, like, seeing that, like, just the replay of it, I'm like, he's done for at least a few weeks. And him on the sideline, he was out a couple plays. I think he was genuinely very hurt. Not very hurt, but more, he wasn't healthy for a good middle stretch season. And we've seen over the past, I think it's 7 weeks now, 13 touchdowns, 1 interception for Aaron Rodgers. Like, he hasn't looked bad at all. And I think he brings an attitude, at least if we're talking about keeping a guy like Garrett happy, and guys like Brees and all of these young guys who have sat through losing season after losing season. When you have a guy like Rodgers, at least the hope in the building is there. And as I go on with this thought, I'm realizing that I definitely want Rodgers back this year, and that's not Rodgers back next year. And that's not something I was fully out 3 weeks ago. I was fully out on this idea, but I mean, it feels like it makes a lot of sense, at least in terms of keeping guys happy. I know we've had some off the field stuff. We have him on McAfee. We have him on this or that. And he's the one talking about limiting these off field distractions. But it feels like the attitude of wanting to win is inside the building when Rodgers is there. This year was a mess, of course. You could put a lot of it on Woody. We could put it on the coaching staff. But at least when Rodgers is healthy, these games are very close. And the one-score games, they're 2-6 in them. That's good coaching. That's defense getting a little bit better next year. That's adding to the defensive line. And we're maybe a 9-win team. I know, it's
plus,
the Jets,
if you want to blow it up, if that doesn't work after this year, it's better to blow it up with Aller and Arch Manning and what's supposed to be a pretty good quarterback class next year.
Right.
As opposed to this year where you're probably going to it reminds me of 2015 when Winston went 1, Mariota went 2, and then there was like nobody for, I think like the late second round was the next guy. Like that's what this year
was. Yeah, Connor Cook. Yeah.
I'd blow it up more after that year, especially because you can get one more year out of Devontae. And I really do want Devontae back. And I feel like the only way to get him back is to have either Rodgers or Derek Carr as your quarterback. And I don't think the Saints are going to necessarily let Carr end up with the Jets. So that's all. Then you have to go, all right, new GM. You got to get a new quarterback while picking in a bad spot of the draft for a quarterback in a bad year. You have to trade Rodgers. You have to possibly consider trading Garrett Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
You have to consider looking at Brees Hall. Like that's a lot. Imagine if this new GM gets here and his first few moves are just rip everything apart. That's a tough way to start with your fan base too.
It is, but also it might be necessary. It might be necessary, my friend. I sense that I'm still the staunchest in the not like don't bring back Rodgers camp. I'm not necessarily 100% against bringing him back. I just don't think it would be necessarily the best decision. I think honestly, Mike Giarraputo, I think I got to figure out ways to distinguish between you two besides saying Mike.
Almost like we have different letters that begin our last names.
Yeah, L, G.
L and Mike G.
Yeah, saying L and G is weird, but I don't know. I mean, Mike.
Yeah, because going Mike is
all right, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. You'll be L. Do you want me to call you L? Do you want that to be your name? You want me to
Mike
say
L. What's
L? All right. It feels so like, hey, here's.
I'll tell you what. Mike Luciano, you can keep Mike. I'll take Mike G. You were here before me.
What an honor!
So you can keep your own name.
Mike G feels like Uber Eats for Mike G. Like that feels like it's just like horrible. Like
you were overthinking things here, Justin.
But anyway, I still I don't know. I think me and Mike G have different evaluations of where Aaron Rodgers is at this stage.
Okay.
I wouldn't say he's a top 12 quarterback. I don't think he's particularly.
I think he's like 17, 18-ish.
Yeah, I'm trending more towards
fine.
17 to 20, possibly lower next year. Because my other concern, and this is, I expressed this before, I don't think we get 17 healthy games from Aaron Rodgers next year. I'd be very surprised. He's now at 3 years in a row where he's been injured. He was hurt in Green Bay his last year. He tore his Achilles in his first year with the Jets, and now he's played through 3 different injuries this year. Yes, it seems like he's going to play every single game, but as we've seen, he probably shouldn't have played every single game because he wasn't healthy enough to be doing that. He was playing with an MCL sprain. He was playing with basically a hamstring tear, and he was playing with a high ankle sprain.
Yeah.
And it was really taking its toll on him. You could see how much it was affecting his performance. A great performance, a genuinely really, really good performance against a 32nd ranked Jaguars defense in perfect weather with perfect conditions with an excellent offensive line performance where he had all day to throw. That doesn't move me. If you could guarantee those conditions every single game for Aaron Rodgers, yeah, I think he'd be a top 10 quarterback next year. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality of it. He's going to have to be, there's going to be situations where he's running around. Honestly, the Jets have had pretty good offensive line luck in terms of injuries this year. They Vera Tucker missed 2 games. Moses has been battling through an injury, but I guess the Tyron Smith injury, but Foshin has been better anyway. Right. There's going to be games where maybe his offensive line isn't great next year, and he does need to move outside the pocket, or he's going to get hurt, or something's going to happen. I don't know. I'm not saying I can't see a scenario where the Jets are a playoff team if they run it back with Aaron Rodgers next year. I think it's more likely than not that they are a 7-win football team, even with a better coaching staff, if they run it back with Rodgers and they run it back with Adams. Now, that being said, I'm not saying there's a better alternative available. So I'm not arguing here. That's the part of me that's like, maybe Rodgers is just the best of a bad situation. I'm willing to admit that, and I think that could be possible. I'm still not there yet. I still think there's probably better alternatives. I mean, not necessarily to win 10 games, because I don't think a quarterback is available that the Jets are going to win 10 games with next year. But I don't know. I don't think with Rodgers you can sell me that they're a playoff team next year. And that sucks. Maybe that is the best situation long-term. Maybe it is best to win 7 games as opposed to 3 and keep Garrett Wilson happy and, maybe keep your stars around. Maybe that is the best scenario. But I think it's a really hard sell for me to tell me that this team can win or can make the playoffs or even win a playoff game next year with Aaron Rodgers, with Devontae Adams, especially because that limits their cap flexibility as well. Because Devontae Adams is on the books for 30-something million. Obviously, that number will come down. Yeah, but you could get rid of pretty much all that money if you were to move on from him and Rodgers, and now you have more cap space. And I'm not saying Devontae Adams is still playing football at a very high level. I would love to be on the team next year, but I'm saying that that's another thing to consider as well. Is you really limit the moves you could do if you do keep Rodgers and Adams.
Like, as much as I mentioned too, though, about like you got to sell the fan base on certainty, because you do have to. You have to instill some sort of confidence in your fan base that we're building a winning team, especially with a new regime, a new coach, a new GM at the same time. I think part of the reason I'm trending more towards keeping Rodgers is if the locker, like the fact that Rich Cimini's guess about what Garrett Wilson's friend might think, the fact that even got out, I don't think that either of them are straight up making it up for no reason. The fact that I think so many important players, because Breece Hall posted free 20 on Instagram. Yeah. Also, and we've heard stuff about Sauce if he doesn't get paid. Like, if what you have, because the Jets, I think if they were to rebuild just without it, I think they have a couple of nice pieces. They have a good offensive line for a quarterback to come into. You still have Wilson. The defense, when better coached, I think is going to be an above average unit next year once they get not Ulbrich in. Like if Vrabel comes in, I think that's a pretty close to a top 10, like a 12-ish defense. I think that's perfectly reasonable take.
Sure, yeah.
Like if you're going to alienate and just get rid of everything positive you have, because I don't think the Jets can do like a half-measure rebuild if they get rid of Aaron Rodgers. It is full-on, rip it down. Dolphins the first year with Brian Flores. I think it might be that level of just complete desolation of a roster outside of the offensive line.
Well, I disagree. I don't think if they get rid of Rodgers, you think if they get rid of Rodgers, they're like trading Sauce, Garrett, and Breece?
Well, I think Devontae's gone. I think it will irritate Garrett to the point where he's going to request a trade, and then a new GM with no loyalty to Garrett Wilson might say, "Okay." I think that's the future I'm dreading. Even if it ends up, we don't know if Arch Manning or Drew Aller is going to be good. So if that's the future I'm dreading, and that's I think more likely to happen without Rodgers. If they go with Rodgers, I think there's at least a sense in that locker room that there is an attempt to, it may not work, but we are attempting to make the playoffs. Because if Garrett Wilson goes into another year knowing that they're not going to make the play, like that wears on people.
Right.
How much longer is he going to have to suck it up, or Sauce going to have to suck it up?
You're right. And I think for that reason, that's a good argument against running it back with Tyrod or something and having Tyrod Taylor. Say they were to draft Jalen Milroe, I think you could do that. But if you had Tyrod Taylor, a mid-round quarterback, and Jordan Travis as your quarterback room, you're not selling anybody in that locker room that you're trying to make the playoffs that year. I don't think anybody will buy that. So, But I don't think Rodgers is necessarily the only way to do that. And I know I threw it out there as a joke earlier. I know I threw it out there kind of as a joke. I think there's a world where I could be okay with Kirk Cousins. And let me explain what that
world is. Let
me explain what that world is. The world is you move on from Aaron Rodgers, you take that full cap hit this year, you eat the $49 million, and then you cut it. You're done after that. You give him that $49 million this year. He is not on the books in the future. You are taking your medicine right now. You are restarting. Kirk Cousins is going to be released most likely by the Falcons. I don't think they're going to find a trade partner for him. Mm-hmm. What's floated around there, and it makes sense, is that he could do a Russell Wilson where he signs as a minimum contract with a team next year because he's already making a lot of money from the Falcons, and he can take a cheap contract. There's the world where I can be sold on Kirk Cousins because I don't think the Jets are winning the Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. But I do think that Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Tyrod Taylor. I think he's a better quarterback than most available options on the market. He's in that, Derek Carr-ish tier if he were to get released. I know he's older coming off the Achilles too, so that's something to consider. But I think that's the scenario where you can sell yourself on, okay, maybe we can make the playoffs with Kirk Cousins next year. I don't think they would, but maybe you could. You're at least pretending that you're trying to make the playoffs, and you're not paying a lot of money to him, and you moved on from Aaron Rodgers. You have wiped your hands clean. You have much more financial flexibility going forward for the new regime. I think there's a world where that makes sense. I'm not ready to say that would be my preferred option right now, but I think I might prefer that over just bringing back Aaron Rodgers. I think I would have to think on that more, but I think right now, me saying that, I would. And as Optimum Customer Support says, the Jets play the Falcons next year. Watch it on one of our premium cable plans. Hey, my cable is fine, so I got no issue with Optimum's cable. Fix you guys.
The problem with like the Russell Wilson comparison, Russell Wilson was younger, was not hurt. I mean, he had an injury, but not like debilitatingly hurt. And he was better as last year in Denver than Kirk Cousins was this year.
How much is he? They're about the same age, no? They're literally the same age. They're both 36.
Well, yeah.
I know one is the Achilles, so that's something, but they're not.
And Russell Wilson at the last year in Denver, I think, was better than Kirk Cousins this year in Atlanta.
Well, Cousins, I mean, the stretch of games has been the last 4 games have been brutal, but he threw for 500 yards against Tampa Bay. Like, it's not like he's done, Justin.
He was good last year before he got the Achilles injury.
Exactly. I can't go as far.
Atlanta also thinks got right now probably everything considered a better offense than the Jets, especially if the Jets get rid of Devontae.
It runs better for sure. It's definitely great.
I can't. I don't know if I can get on board with the Cousins to the Jets. I don't think it would. I think Rodgers makes more sense. I think keeping Rodgers would make more sense.
Yeah,
than going out of our way to bring in than eating $49 million. The difference between what the Broncos did and what the Jets would be doing in that scenario is that they had this quarterback class was Bo Nix was the 6th guy taken. Like, that's the difference. And like Bo Nix would be probably my quarterback, 2 or 3 if he was in this class. So I don't know. We don't have a quarterback that we could move on to. I mean, are we confident in Jordan Travis?
No, Travis will not factor into the plans for 2025. I don't think you necessarily need to draft a quarterback in the first round if you bring in Cousins. Like, Cousins would be 1-year minimum deal. That's what Russell Wilson signed with the Steelers. If he's
we're punting the year. We're punting the year in that.
We're punting the year with Rodgers.
That's what I'm saying.
We're punting the year with Rodgers.
Not with Rodgers playing. Even if you grade on a curve, like because Jacksonville, even if you grade on a curve. Rodgers at probably 75% of the Jacksonville game in terms of quality. It's a lot better than Kirk Cousins. And then you keep Devontae.
If you were to ask me right now who I think is going to have a better season if they were to start every game next year for a neutral team between a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, I think the difference will be negligible. I don't think it'll be a significant difference.
Hard to say.
I don't know about that. I mean, we saw Rodgers and guys, my laptop's on 1%, so if I lose you, it's been a pleasure. But I know we're about wrapped up here anyway, but I think the difference between Rodgers and Cousins, I mean, Cousins, he might be playing through things that we don't know about. Rodgers played through things that we now know about. But Rodgers has, 3,200 yards, 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's been, if you just look straight at the numbers, you would say, well, this is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. This is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen in the Jets uniform, which is the case.
That's true, but that's also an extremely low bar.
And he also had the same injury. And Rodgers, I think, has come back better from it.
Well, Rodgers is further removed from it. Cousins tore his Achilles later.
Rodgers also older, and he's always been more talented than Kirk Cousins,
Sure.
but I think he's had a more successful year.
Cousins is less removed from the Achilles injury, and I think another year removed from it, he should be better than he was this year. He should look at least a little bit more mobile than he did at times. And also, I feel like, man, as good as the box score numbers do look for Rodgers, and they have been good, and I do agree this is one of the best seasons probably by a Jets quarterback ever, which is an unbelievably low bar to clear. The advanced numbers aren't good. He's third. When he entered last week, 33rd in the league in completion percentage over expected. His EPA per play is like 23rd. I don't think he's been good in totality this year. He's been a below average quarterback. Now, again, the context is he was playing hurt for part of that. And I get that. And I don't think he's the 23rd best quarterback in the NFL when he's healthy. The issue is 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, 3 years in a row where he's been hurt. I do not trust that he will be playing at a healthy level all of next year. I think he's going to get hurt. Maybe he'll play through it. Maybe he'll suck again playing through it. I think the difference between Rodgers and Cousins, because I'm also not confident Kirk Cousins plays a fully healthy season. I just think financially, instead of pushing the $63 million cap hit to 2026 and further ruining your finances for the next few years for the next regime is going to look at this situation and say, let's just wipe our hands, clean the slate, get Aaron Rodgers out of here, bring in someone like Kirk Cousins, who, again, Rodgers, I do believe is better and probably would be better if they were both healthy next year. I don't think the difference is that significant. I don't think you're winning anything with either player. Why not just reset, get a better financial situation, and help out the new regime?
But really quick, though, because Mike Giarraputo's laptop is running quick, I want to sign out really quick on the Jet Press podcast. I want to give Mike a chance to promote himself really quick before the show ends and before technology gives out on him. So, Mike, tell everybody on the Jet Press where they can find your work.
You can find it right on Twitter. It's Mike.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Oh, what timing. Amazing.
Oh, no.
If he did, I think we did just officially lose him. I can plug his Twitter because I do have his Twitter. I'll plug him for him.
Okay.
You can find him on Twitter. Let me pull this up. It's at Mike Giarraputo. That's at Mike, and then his last name is spelled Giarraputo. He's also a contributor for the Jet Press. You can find him there as well. Check out his articles. Check out all of our stuff there. We appreciate Mike for joining us. We might be seeing more of him in the future. And that's really unfortunate timing that his laptop died right as he was about to plug himself. But
literally, he got mutt out, and then that was it.
Yeah. That's crazy. Optimum Customer Support. Cousins can help us party like it's 2009, which is when our servers were first installed. You are doing so much research on this, and I appreciate that. Also, it's not Brian, or it's not Josh, and it's not AJ, unless it is Brian, and somehow he's like switching between two accounts, maybe even a second account. That'd be pretty crazy. That's
a lot of effort.
You know what? Honest. Why does it feel like that's it? I feel like these read as Brian comments.
Yeah.
But either way, if it's Lindsay, I appreciate your assistance this morning, and hopefully we can get my internet fixed as soon as possible.
So real quick though, any final words here before we sign off, Justin?
Yeah, that was good. It was a good discussion about Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. I'm serious about that, and I want to talk more about that like next week or so. Or actually, we won't be back next week because a week from today, Optimal Customer Service said I'm AJ. I don't even know what to believe anymore. If you are, awesome. Roger, we really appreciate it. Roger says, sorry I'm late for one of my favorite Jets podcasts on YouTube. My take is
thank you, Roger.
Appreciate you. We will be back not next Wednesday, but we will be back on Sunday breaking down the Jets game against the Rams. We will not be here on Wednesday because next Wednesday is Christmas. So we hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas, a happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. We hope you all enjoy the time with your friends and family. So yeah, we won't be here on Wednesday, but we will be back on Sunday breaking down that Rams game and probably talking some more Aaron Rodgers because that seems to be the hot topic these days.
Oh, he always seems to wiggle his way into the news. We'll give him that. He's mastered that craft among many others.
For the sake of my job and for the sake of content, maybe I do hope Rodgers is back next year. Those Ryan Clark feud articles aren't going to write themselves. So,
are you really excited about writing about Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor combining for the 25?
I'm not excited about the Jets in most ways right now, but it's okay.
Well, if you got to pick one for our benefit, I think it'd be Rodgers.
Fair enough.
Really quick, Roger says, my take is they can get Gruden. I'd be very against Gruden.
I don't know about Gruden.
No, I'm very against Gruden. Or Vrabel to run it back with Rodgers because they can get Rodgers respect while rebuilding. But like saying that Rodgers Rodgers and Vrabel gives them a shot at doing something, whereas rebuilding gives them a shot at doing nothing. I get the appeal of that.
I think
Gruden, I would be getting too far removed. I'm not in on Gruden at all.
I think Brian might be coming clean here. He said libel, but it could have been me. So we'll see. I mean, either way, Optimum Customer Support, I appreciate your help this morning. And Brian, I appreciate the commitment to a bit because I will always respect that. But anyway, until next time, until Sunday, thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike Luciano on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter, Justin T. Freed. Follow Mike Giarraputo, who was with us at Mike Giarraputo on Twitter. Follow JetPress at the JetPress. Download the JetPress podcast wherever you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can also become a member, which we always appreciate. You get it's 99 cents a month, and you get your comments in chat prioritized. Great way to help the show and support what we do. We stream live every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, except next Wednesday, which is Christmas, and live immediately following every single Jets game. So we will be here on Sunday. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That's Mike Luciano. We did have Mike Giarraputo. So for all three of us, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you guys on Sunday.
Happy holidays, everybody.